Listen, the rain is telling us it's time. The lights are low, and you have found your way back to our sanctuary for unsettling stories, the kind designed to wrap you in a blanket of comfort and dread. Before we descend into tonight's tale, if you feel at home in the shadows, please consider becoming a permanent resident by subscribing and ringing the notification bell. Let me know this story chilled you by pressing the like button, and be sure to comment below with the moment that truly got under your skin. Your support breathed life into this darkness. Now, let us begin. When you live a dozen miles from the nearest town, a blizzard is your worst enemy. It cuts you off from the world. I thought the blizzard was the monster that night, but then came the knocking, and I realized the storm wasn't the monster. It was just the thing the real monster used for cover. I moved into the old farmhouse in rural North Dakota for the solitude. I'm a writer, and the silence of the vast, empty plains was supposed to be my muse. The house was a 2-story wooden island in an ocean of wheat fields, with the nearest neighbor a half-hour drive away. For the first few months, it was perfect. The silence was a peaceful blanket. But when winter came, I learned that silence has teeth. The blizzard wasn't in the forecast. It came out of nowhere, a furious white wall of wind and snow that descended on the plains and swallowed the world whole. The power went out within the first hour. The single road to my house disappeared under a 4-foot drift. My cell phone had no signal. I was completely and utterly snowed in, cut off from everything. But I was prepared. I had a fireplace, plenty of food, and a stack of books. I wasn't scared. A storm was just a storm. The first knock came around 10 p.m. A slow, deliberate, heavy thump, thump, thump on my solid oak front door. It wasn't the sound of a branch or the wind. It was the sound of a fist. My heart leapt into my throat. It was impossible. The state police had issued a no-travel advisory hours ago. The roads were impassable. No car could have made it out here. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. All I could see was a maelstrom of swirling white snow. There was no one there. I told myself it was the wind, a strange acoustic trick of the storm. I went back to my fireplace, my sense of peaceful isolation shattered. An hour passed. Then it came again, from the back door this time. Thump, thump, thump. Slower, more patient. This time, I didn't go to the door. I ran upstairs to the spare bedroom window which looked out over the backyard. I wiped the condensation from the cold glass and peered out into the raging blizzard. In a brief, sudden lull in the swirling snow, the moonlight illuminated the landscape for a split second, and I saw him. He was standing at the far edge of my yard, near the dark skeletal shapes of the tree line. A tall, thin figure. He wasn't dressed for a blizzard. He was wearing a simple dark overcoat, the kind you'd wear in the city in the fall. No hat, no gloves. His hands were hanging limply at his sides. He was just standing there, perfectly still, his head tilted up, looking directly at my house. And then the snow closed in again, and he was gone. I stumbled back from the window, my mind struggling to process what I had seen. Who was he? How did he get here? And why wasn't he freezing to death? The temperature outside was well below zero. A person dressed like that wouldn't last 10 minutes. I spent the next hour in a state of paranoid terror, moving from window to window, trying to catch another glimpse of him, but seeing nothing but the endless, hypnotic chaos of the snow. I retreated away from the windows, feeling like a cornered animal in my own home. My sanctuary had become a cage, and something was outside, circling it. The sound started, not knocking anymore. It was a soft, dry, scraping sound. It started on the living room wall, the one facing the fields. Scrap, scrap. It was the sound of a fingernail or a single dry branch being dragged slowly and deliberately across the wooden siding of my house. I was in the living room. I ran to the kitchen, and a moment later the scraping sound started on the kitchen wall. I scrambled upstairs to my bedroom. The scraping followed, starting on the exterior wall right next to my head. He was following me. He knew exactly where I was inside the house. I tried to distract myself, to drown out the sounds. I turned on a battery-powered radio, but the storm killed any signal. All I got was static. I sat in the middle of the floor, wrapped in a blanket, humming to myself, anything to create a barrier of noise between me and the sounds outside. The scraping would stop for long periods, lulling me into a false sense of security, and then it would start again, on a different wall, a quiet, patient reminder that he was still there, that he wasn't going anywhere. Sometime after 2 a.m., I knew I had to see him again. I had to know what I was dealing with. I grabbed my old digital camera, the only camera I had with a powerful, blinding flash. I waited until I heard the scraping sound on the wall just outside the living room window. My heart pounding, my hands shaking, I ran to the window. I aimed the camera out into the swirling darkness and pressed the button. The flash was explosive, a silent, white detonation that illuminated the blizzard for a single, perfect, terrifying instant. I immediately looked at the small screen on the back of the camera to see the picture. The photo showed the side of my house, the swirling snowflakes frozen in mid-air. And it showed him. He was standing right there, his hand raised, his finger the one scraping against the wood. His face was turned towards the window, towards the flash. His skin was a pale, waxy, bluish white, the color of deep frostbite. But the most horrifying part was his eyes. They were wide open, and they were completely, perfectly white, like two frozen-over ponds. And in his other hand, held gently, he was carrying a small dark shape, a dead bird. The photograph broke my rational mind. This was not a lost traveler. This was not a prankster. This was something else, something that belonged to the storm, something ancient and cold. I deleted the picture, a frantic, useless gesture, as if erasing the image could erase the reality of what was outside my window. After the flash, the nature of his visit changed. The scraping stopped, the knocking stopped. He was silent for a long time. I almost dared to hope that the flash had scared him away. Then I heard a new sound, a soft, gentle thud against the back door. I waited for a long time, listening. Nothing. I crept to the back door and peered through its small curtained window. Lying on the welcome mat, placed neatly in the center, was the small frozen body of the dead bird I had seen in the photograph. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What did this mean? An hour later, another soft thud, this time against the front door. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I crept to the front door, my eye pressed to the peehole. Lying on my porch was a snowflake, an impossibly large, perfectly formed, six-pointed snowflake, the size of my hand. And even though it was on the relatively sheltered porch, it wasn't melting. I finally understood. He wasn't trying to get in. He wasn't trying to break down my door and hurt me. He was trying to give me things. He was making offerings. He was courting me? Trading? I didn't know, but the quiet generosity was somehow more terrifying than a direct assault. The final offering came just before dawn. I heard the scraping sound again, but this time it was on the roof. It was followed by the sound of something heavy sliding down the shingles, and then a loud, wet thud as it landed on the porch right outside my living room window. I forced myself to look. It was an icicle, almost 3 feet long, as thick as my arm, and perfectly clear, except for the center of it. Frozen deep inside the ice was a dark, swirling reddish-brown stain. I stared at the blood-filled icicle, and I knew what he was doing. The bird, the snowflake, the ice, the children of the storm. He was showing me what he could offer me. He was showing me his world, and he wanted me to accept it. He wanted me to open the door, to invite him in. He was waiting for a trade. The blizzard raged for another full day. I was a prisoner in my own home, a starving, sleep-deprived wreck. I had retreated to the basement, the only place without windows, the only place I felt partially safe. But I could still hear him, the gentle thud of his offerings being left at my doors, the soft whisper of his presence circling the house. I knew I couldn't last another night. He was patient. He was waiting for my resolve to break, for my curiosity or despair to make me open the door. He was a creature of the cold. The storm was his home, his strength, and I realized, in a moment of desperate clarity, that the only thing that could fight the cold was warmth, was fire. I found my emergency fireplace logs and the can of lighter fluid I kept for the grill. My plan was insane, suicidal, but it was the only plan I had. I waited for a momentary lull in the howling wind. I ran upstairs, unbolted the front door, and threw the logs out onto the wooden porch. I doused them, and the porch itself with the lighter fluid, squirting a long trail back inside to the edge of the living room rug. Then I lit a match. The porch erupted in a violent whoosh of flame. The fire roared to life, a brilliant, beautiful, hungry wall of heat and light against the swirling white of the blizzard. I peered through the window. At the edge of the yard, I saw him, the man in the storm. He recoiled from the heat, his pale form wavering and indistinct in the firelight, like a mirage. He let out a high-pitched, hissing sound, like steam escaping a frozen pipe. The fire was my salvation and my damnation. The dry old wood of the farmhouse caught quickly. I had made my choice. I would rather burn my sanctuary to the ground than let him inside it. As the smoke detector began to shriek, I smashed a back window and scrambled out into the snow, escaping the inferno I had created. The heat from the massive fire was a protective bubble, pushing back the cold, pushing back the storm. And the man who belonged to the storm was gone, driven away by a force he couldn't comprehend. I was found by a snowplow driver the next morning, huddled in my car, suffering from frostbite and smoke inhalation. The farmhouse was a smoldering black ruin. The official report said the fire was an accident caused by a faulty furnace during the blizzard. I never told anyone the real story. I live in Florida now. I need the heat. I need the sun. I thought it was over. But every winter when the news reports the first big cold snap up north, the strange things start. My breath will suddenly fog in a warm, air-conditioned room. A perfect, impossible frost pattern, like a frozen feather, will appear on the inside of my bedroom window. And sometimes, late on the coldest nights of the year, when a cold front pushes all the way down to me, I'll hear it. A soft, slow, patient thump, thump, thump on my apartment door. He's not gone. He hasn't forgotten me. He's just waiting for the weather to be right. And he's still trying to deliver his gifts. When we moved into the Maple Creek cul-de-sac, everyone told us the same thing. You have to come to the annual block party. Everyone comes. It's a tradition. We thought it was just a friendly neighborhood. We didn't understand that everyone comes wasn't an invitation. It was a rule. My wife Karen and I moved into our dream house in Maple Creek with our 2 young kids, Lily and Jake. It was the perfect suburban cul-de-sac, the kind you see in movies. Perfectly manicured lawns, kids riding bikes in the street, and neighbors who brought you welcome baskets and knew your name within an hour. The unofficial mayor of our little street was a man named Mr. Henderson, a cheerful, retired man who lived in the house directly across from us. He was the head of the neighborhood watch and the organizer of the street's biggest event, the annual end-of-summer block party. From the day we moved in, that party was all anyone talked about. "Oh, you're going to love it," our neighbor Joanne told us. "It's what makes this street so special. Everyone participates." The way she emphasized everyone was a little strange, but I brushed it off as small-town pride. The first sign that something was deeply wrong in our perfect little neighborhood involved the family who lived 2 doors down, the Millers. They were quiet, kept to themselves, and were the only family that didn't seem to share the street's obsessive community spirit. I saw Mr. Henderson talking to Mr. Miller in his driveway one afternoon. From a distance, it looked friendly, but as I got closer, I could hear the hard, insistent edge in Henderson's voice. "You know the rules, John," Henderson said, his cheerful smile not reaching his eyes. "Everyone participates. It's for the good of the neighborhood. It keeps us all on the same page." The day before the block party, I was taking out the trash when I saw the Millers. They were packing their car, throwing bags into the trunk with a frantic, desperate haste. They looked terrified. Mrs. Miller saw me watching from my driveway. Her eyes were wide with a look of pure animal panic. She subtly put a single finger to her lips in a shushing gesture, a silent, desperate warning, before getting in the car and speeding away down the street without so much as a backward glance. It was strange, but I figured they just had a family emergency. The truly impossible part was what happened that evening. A new family was moving into the Miller's house, not the next week or the next day, that very same night. A moving truck was already there, and a new smiling family were carrying boxes inside, as if the Millers had never existed. The day of the block party arrived. After seeing the Millers flee, we felt a deep sense of unease. We thought about not going, but the social pressure was immense. Every neighbor we saw that morning reminded us, their smiles just a little too wide. "See you at noon. Can't wait." It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. The party was a scene of almost unnerving perfection. Tables were lined up in the middle of the cul-de-sac, laden with identical bowls of potato salad and coleslaw. Everyone, and I mean everyone, was wearing pastel-colored clothes, pale yellows, blues, and pinks. A single large grill was set up in Henderson's driveway, and he was the only one cooking, cheerfully handing out perfectly grilled burgers and hot dogs to the smiling, happy crowd. My wife, Karen, is a vegetarian, so she stuck to the salads, but I, wanting to fit in, took a burger for myself and got hot dogs for the kids. The food was delicious, and as the afternoon wore on, a strange, placid calm began to settle over me. The low-grade anxiety of a new mortgage, the stress of my job, it all just seemed to melt away, replaced by a deep, unquestioning sense of contentment. I felt harmonious. I looked over at my kids. They were playing with the other neighborhood children, but the game was strange. They were all running in a slow, rhythmic circle, not laughing or shouting, just smiling those same placid, empty smiles. It was Karen who snapped me out of it. She grabbed my arm, her hand trembling, her face pale with fear. "Tom, look at them," she whispered, her voice tight. "Look at their eyes. There's nothing there. It's the food. Something is in the food. I didn't eat the meat, but you and the kids did." I looked at her, and the first emotion I felt was a surge of irritation. Why was she trying to ruin this perfect, peaceful day? The words came out of my mouth before I could even think. "Relax, Karen," I said, my own voice sounding distant and calm to my ears. "Everything is fine. Just have a burger. Join the community." A cold jolt went through me. I was quoting Mr. Henderson. The strange chemical happiness from the food wore off by the next morning, leaving behind a residue of pure, horrifying dread. Karen had been right. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with our neighbors, and now, whatever it was inside me and my children. We had to get out. We started packing our car, trying to act as normal as possible. We told the kids we were taking a surprise trip to the beach. They just smiled their placid, agreeable smiles. "That sounds nice, Dad." No excitement, no questions, just calm acceptance. As I was putting the last suitcase in the trunk, Mr. Henderson walked across the street, holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. His smile was as bright and unwavering as the midday sun. "Thought you might want some leftovers for the road," he said cheerfully. "But are you sure you have to go so soon? We were all just getting to know you. You're part of the harmony now." His eyes were friendly, but his words were a threat, clear as day. "Family emergency," I mumbled, closing the trunk. "We have to go." "A shame," he said, his smile not faltering. "Well, drive safe." We all got in the car. I started the engine, my heart pounding. I was about to pull away when the other neighbors started to emerge from their houses. One by one, they came out onto their perfect lawns. They didn't yell. They didn't try to stop us. They just stood there, smiling. A silent, smiling, pastel-colored army watching us. I put the car in drive and started towards the end of the cul-de-sac, the only way out. But a car, our neighbor Joanne's minivan, was blocking the road. She was just standing there, calmly watering her prize-winning roses, completely ignoring us. We were blockaded, trapped by a wall of suffocating suburban politeness. Defeated, we drove back into our driveway. We were forced to go back inside our house. We locked the doors, and we watched as the siege began. It was the most terrifying siege imaginable. All day and into the night, our neighbors were just there. Mr. Henderson was on his porch swing, reading a newspaper. Joanne was weeding her garden. Other families were having quiet, smiling picnics on their lawns, all of them, at all times, facing our house. A constant, friendly, inescapable surveillance. We were prisoners in our own home. We couldn't call the police. What would we say? Our neighbors are too friendly, and one of them is blocking the street with their car? We were being held hostage by the rules of a society we had willingly joined. The worst part was the fight inside my own head. The lingering effect of the food from the party was a quiet, insidious whisper telling me to just give in, to open the door, to go outside and join them, to be happy, to be harmonious. It was a constant battle against an enemy that was already inside my own brain. My wife, Karen, who had eaten nothing, was our anchor. She was the only one whose mind was still completely her own. Our only hope was an outside variable, something that could break the neighborhood's perfect self-contained loop. It came late on the second night. The bright, unmistakable headlights of an Amazon delivery truck, its driver clearly lost, turned into our cul-de-sac. The effect was instantaneous. Every smiling head on the street turned in perfect unison to face this new, unexpected variable. Their perfect, choreographed surveillance was broken. This was our chance. "Now!" I screamed to Karen. We didn't use the doors. We ran to the back of the house, smashed open the kitchen window, and scrambled out into our backyard. We vaulted the fence, crashing through our new neighbor's perfect garden, and we just ran, plunging into the dark woods that bordered the subdivision. We abandoned everything. The house, the car, our jobs, our entire life. We just ran. Years have passed. We live in a crowded, noisy, beautifully imperfect city now. We never told anyone the real story. We just said we had a bad experience with a strange neighborhood association. But I've never forgotten that placid, empty smile, or the feeling of my own free will being gently, politely, chemically erased. Last month, out of a sick, morbid curiosity, I looked up our old house online. It was for sale again. It was a beautiful listing. The photos showed the pristine lawn, the lovely interior. It looked so normal. But it was the realtor's written description at the bottom of the page that made the blood in my veins run cold. I read the final paragraph aloud to Karen, my voice shaking. "This home is part of the vibrant and exceptionally close-knit Maple Creek community, famous for its annual neighborhood-wide block party, a cherished tradition that every single resident participates in. New owners will be welcomed with open arms and are expected to join the community spirit. Participation is not just encouraged, it is what makes us who we are." The house is still a trap. The block party is still the bait. And the neighborhood is a living, breathing organism that is always, always looking for new, happy families to invite over for a barbecue. My summer job was a fire lookout on Juniper Peak. You're paid to be alone and watch the horizon for smoke. The perfect job until you realize something on the horizon is watching you back. And it's learning everything you do. I took the job as a fire lookout for the solitude. I was a forestry student, and the idea of spending a whole summer in a tiny glass room perched on top of a mountain 100 feet in the air sounded like paradise. My post was Juniper Peak, a remote tower in the middle of a vast, empty national forest in Wyoming. The isolation was absolute. The nearest paved road was a 2-hour hike away. My world was a 360-degree panorama of green trees and distant blue mountains. My only connection to the outside world was a crackly, solar-powered radio to check in with my supervisor, a woman named Sarah, twice a day. The first couple of weeks were blissfully monotonous. I'd wake up, make coffee, and spend my day scanning the horizon with a pair of powerful military-grade binoculars. I'd read books, watch eagles ride the thermals, and feel like the king of my own private, silent world. The first time I saw him, I thought he was a lost hiker. I was doing my morning scan, and I caught a flicker of movement on a distant barren ridge about 2 miles away. Through my binoculars, I could see it was a man, standing perfectly still, looking back in the direction of my tower. He was too far away to make out any details, just a dark, human shape against the bright sky. I radioed it in to Sarah, as per protocol. "Keep an eye on him," she said, her voice crackling. "Hikers rarely go that deep. Let me know if he seems to be in distress." He wasn't in distress. He was just there. The next day, he was in the exact same spot. And the day after that, a silent, distant statue. On the third day, I was watching him, a strange unease growing in my stomach. I was tired, so I took off my ranger hat and ran my hand through my hair. As I watched through the binoculars, the distant figure 2 miles away raised its arm and made the exact same motion. I froze, my hand still on my head. It had to be a coincidence, a trick of the light, the heat haze. I slowly, deliberately raised my coffee mug to take a drink. The figure on the ridge raised its arm in a perfect synchronous mirror image. I lowered the mug. The figure lowered its arm. I felt a jolt of fear, so cold it seemed to suck the heat right out of the air. This was impossible. I tested it one more time. My hand trembling, I gave a small, hesitant wave. The figure on the ridge, a tiny speck to the naked eye, waved back. My paradise had become a high-altitude surveillance chamber. My life was now a bizarre, silent performance for a one-man audience 2 miles away. The mimicry was constant and perfect. Every small, unconscious action I took in my glass box was perfectly, instantly mirrored by the distant figure. If I stretched, he stretched. If I cleaned a window, he would mimic the motion. If I paced from one side of the room to the other, his tiny form would do the same on his barren ridge. The psychological toll was immediate and immense. I felt like a bug under a microscope. I was completely exposed, my every action being studied, recorded, and copied. I started to limit my movements, sitting perfectly still for hours, which was a form of torture in itself. I reported it to Sarah again, my voice shaking with the fear I couldn't hide. She was concerned but baffled. "Just keep your log detailed, Ben," was all she could say, "and stay in the tower. Don't go outside." The mimicry escalated from physical to auditory. One evening, I was doing my standard radio check-in. "Base camp, this is Juniper Peak. All clear. Over," I said, my voice sounding small in the vast emptiness. A moment later, a faint, distorted voice crackled back over the radio, a perfect, tinny echo of my own. "All clear. Over." I dropped the radio. It wasn't just watching me, it was listening to me. It was intercepting my radio signals. My only lifeline to the outside world was now a tool for my tormentor. I stopped all non-essential communication. I started to whisper to myself instead of talking. I felt like I was losing my mind. The true escalation, the thing that pushed me from fear into pure, unadulterated terror, happened a week later. One morning, I woke up, and my watcher was no longer on the distant ridge 2 miles away. He had moved. He was now on a closer ridge, only about a mile from my tower. He had cut the distance in half overnight without me seeing him move. And he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a second, smaller, dark figure. And as I stood there, frozen at my window, both figures began to perfectly mirror my shocked, terrified stillness. The terror was now a living, breathing thing. Every day the figures were on a closer ridge, and their numbers were growing. By the end of the second week, there were 5 of them, standing on a rocky outcrop less than half a mile away. A silent, growing audience, all of them a perfect, synchronized choir of my every move. I could see them more clearly now. They were just dark shapes, human-like, but with no discernible features, as if they were made of shadow. The radio mimicry became more sadistic. It was no longer just repeating my check-ins. It started playing back things I had said days, even weeks ago. Snippets of me humming a song, the sound of me cursing when I stubbed my toe, and the worst part, a distorted, crackling recording of a private, emotional phone call I had made to my girlfriend on the satellite phone before this all began. It was a conversation filled with personal details, with hopes and fears, and these things were now broadcasting my own soul back at me, twisting it into a weapon. They weren't just mimicking my actions, they were downloading me. I radioed Sarah, this time screaming, demanding to be evacuated. I told her I was in danger, that my life was at risk. My frantic, panicked voice was the calmest I had been in days, because it was finally honest. She believed me. She told me a supply helicopter was already scheduled for a drop in 2 days. "Just hold on, Ben," she said. "We're going to get you out of there." I just had to survive for 48 more hours. But they knew. I think they heard the helicopter in her voice. That night, the game changed from observation to confrontation. I woke up from a restless sleep to a strange feeling. I looked down from my glass box. They were no longer on the hills. They were here. At the base of my 100-foot tower, standing in a perfect, silent circle around the metal legs, were a dozen of them. Their dark, featureless heads were all tilted up, watching me. I was a specimen in a jar, and they were the scientists, finally coming to get a closer look. I scrambled for the heavy wooden trapdoor in the floor, my only way in or out, and slammed the heavy bolts into place. And then I heard it, a soft metallic sound coming from below. Clang, scrape, clang. I was trapped, 100 feet in the air, listening to the slow, steady, metallic rhythm of the thing climbing my tower. I grabbed the radio, screaming into it, "Mayday! Mayday! Someone is climbing the tower! I repeat, I am not alone!" Sarah's voice came back, but it was a broken, panicked mess, chopped up with static, and another voice, a distorted echo of my own. "Can't, Ben, get a clear signal. What is your position? All clear." The radio was useless. They were intercepting her too. The climbing stopped. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the wind and my own ragged breathing. It had stopped just below the trapdoor. I waited, my eyes glued to the wood, expecting it to splinter and break at any moment. But it didn't. Instead, there was a soft knock. 3 slow, patient, polite knocks. The sun began to rise. I could hear the distant, blessed thwump, thwump, thwump of the helicopter approaching. I just had to wait. I just had to hold on. The presence outside the trapdoor didn't try to break in. It just waited with me. As the sound of the helicopter grew deafeningly loud, I heard the soft clang, clang of the figure climbing back down. The helicopter arrived, hovering just outside my window. They lowered a harness. I unbolted the trapdoor, scrambled out, and let them pull me away into the safety of the sky. I looked down at my empty tower. The silent figures at the base were gone. I was safe. I had survived. The official report was acute isolation-induced paranoia. They said I had hallucinated the whole thing. I was relieved of duty, and I was happy to go. It wasn't until a year later that I understood what had really happened. I was back at college, trying my best to forget the summer I lost my mind. I was walking past the forestry department's job board, and I saw a flyer. Summer job, forest lookout, Juniper Peak. They were looking for my replacement. I felt a cold dread and called Sarah, my old supervisor. "I can't send someone else up there," I said, my voice urgent. "It's not safe." She was confused. "What are you talking about, Ben? We filled your position last year, a week after you left. A young man. He's been up there ever since. He loves it. Files a perfect report every day. Says it's the most peaceful place on earth." And in that moment, the final horrifying truth clicked into place. The thing that climbed my tower that night, it wasn't trying to get in and hurt me. It was the replacement. They had studied me, learned me, downloaded me. And when the helicopter arrived, the person they had rescued wasn't me. It was a perfect copy. And I was the echo, the one that got away, the ghost that was left behind. I hung up the phone and looked at my own reflection in a window. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure who was looking back.